She stole from sick kids, my mother said, and 32 people in a split level house in Mesa, Arizona went quiet around the buffalo chicken dip and the Fox pregame show. I was 24, and by that point, my parents had already put my name on a fake charity, opened a bank account with me, listed as the person in charge, and taken $83,640 from people who thought they were helping local students. I was the one getting letters, donor calls, and a visit from an investigator, while they stood in my childhood living room and acted like I was some kind of private family disappointment. Then, 6 months later, a woman I had never met walked into a church fellowship hall in Tempe and read one sentence out loud, and my father closed his mouth in the middle of my name. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing where you're all listening from. My name is Melissa Ann Carter. I'm 24 years old. Now let me take you back to Mesa, Arizona on Sunday, February 11th, 2024. The thing about being publicly accused by your own mother is that your body remembers the room before it remembers the words. The smell was crockpot queso, hot grease, and my Aunt Janine's White Diamonds perfume. The TV was too loud. Someone's little boy was tapping a plastic helmet on the coffee table over and over. I had a paper plate in my hand with 7 tortilla chips on it because I was planning to eat fast and leave before halftime. My parents, David and Elaine Carter, hosted people the way some families stage a photograph. Everything was arranged. The throw blankets folded, the serving spoons all matched. My father's framed certificate from his years on the East Valley Community Outreach Board was still hung by the hallway arch, even though he had rolled off the board the year before. They liked rooms where they could be seen. I had not wanted to go. 3 days earlier, on Thursday, February 8th, at 4:16 in the afternoon, I got a certified letter at my apartment on South Country Club Drive. I still have the green card. It was from the Arizona Corporation Commission. It said I was listed as the director and treasurer of a nonprofit called Bright Steps Youth Fund, incorporated on October 3rd, 2023, with a mailing address in Gilbert I had never lived at. I read it standing in my kitchen with a rotisserie chicken on the counter and my work shoes still on. The sentence that made my hands go cold was the one that said the organization had failed to respond to a records request tied to donor complaints. I read it 3 times. I was a receptionist at a hair salon in Tempe at that point, not a nonprofit director. I made $19 an hour, plus whatever tip people felt like handing me at the front desk when I squeezed them in. I had $812 in my checking account. I had a 12-year-old Honda Civic with a broken passenger side visor. There was no version of my life where I had quietly started a charity without noticing. So I called the number on the letter. A woman named Paula Jimenez answered on the second ring, and I wrote her name on the back of an Ulta receipt. She told me in a very tired voice that Bright Steps Youth Fund had been registered with my full legal name, my date of birth, and an email address that looked like one of mine with one extra period in it. She told me there was also a state charity registration and a bank account connected to the same organization. She could not give me everything over the phone, but she told me enough for me to understand what I was hearing. Someone had built paperwork around my name. I did what I always do when I'm scared. I got organized. I made a folder on my laptop called Bright Steps. Then I made subfolders: state records, bank, donor contact, screenshots, timeline. I took screenshots of every login I had on my actual email to show where and when I was signed in. I pulled my work schedule for October and November. I printed my pay stubs. I searched my own name in the state corporation database and found it there in black and white. Melissa Ann Carter, director, treasurer, contact person. I did not scream. I did not call my parents. Instead, I drove to Staples on East Southern Avenue at 7:10 that night and bought a 2-inch white binder, sheet protectors, and sticky tabs. That is how long it took my life to become a file. On Friday morning, I called my older cousin, Rachel Dean. Rachel was 31, practical, and one of those women who always seemed to know which office to call and what to ask for once she got someone on the line. She worked in compliance for a dental chain in Chandler, which did not make her a lawyer, but it did make her the first person I trusted to tell me if I was overreacting. I wasn't. She came over that night with a box of Taco Bell and her laptop. We sat at my tiny kitchen table under the buzzing light fixture and pulled every public record we could find. The charity's registered address was a UPS store mailbox on North Higley Road. The phone number on the donor page was a Google Voice number. The website had been built in late October. Rachel ran the domain history and found the recovery email attached to it started with E. Carter. My mother's name was Elaine. Melissa, Rachel said, very softly. Who has your social security card copy from when you applied for college apartments? I knew before I answered. My parents, I said. Silence. Not the dramatic kind, the administrative kind. The kind where two women at a kitchen table understand that paperwork is not an accident. Rachel looked at me and said, do not call them yet. Get the records first. If you've ever had that moment where you know everything is about to change, you know it doesn't feel cinematic. It feels clerical. It feels like opening a fresh notebook and realizing you need more pages than you own. Stay with me because what my mother said at that party was cruel, but it was not the worst part. The worst part was how carefully they had built this. On Sunday morning, before the Super Bowl party, my mother texted me at 10:12 a.m. Please come tonight. People will ask where you are. We should present as a family. That was her phrase. Present as a family. I almost laughed when I read it. I went anyway because I was still at that stage where I thought there might be some explanation that did not require me to accept what was in front of me. Maybe they had signed something without understanding it. Maybe my father had lent my information to some community group. Maybe there was a mess, but not a betrayal. Those are the little lies decent daughters tell themselves to buy one more hour of disbelief. I parked 2 streets over because their driveway was full. My boots clicked on the sidewalk. Someone was grilling in a backyard nearby, and the whole cul-de-sac smelled like charcoal and lighter fluid. I remember seeing my father's silver 2018 Ford F-150 parked at the curb and thinking, with weird clarity, if this becomes what I think it is, I will remember that truck. Inside, my father hugged me with one arm and kept his eyes on the game preview. My mother kissed the air next to my cheek. My younger brother Luke, who was 22 and still lived at home, said, "Hey, Mel," in the flat tone people use when they've been briefed. 3 women from church were at the dining table with paper bowls. Mr. Kendall Reese from the hardware store was there with his wife. My godmother, Teresa Nolan, was by the kitchen island slicing brownies. 32 people in all. I counted later from the photos posted on Facebook. I waited until the room thinned between the first round of appetizers and kickoff. I asked my mother if we could talk in the laundry room. She smiled without moving her lips and said, "No private scenes today." So I said quietly, "Why is my name on a charity registration?" That was all. She turned, lifted her beer bottle slightly like she was making a toast and said, "She stole from sick kids." The room went quiet so fast I could hear the ceiling vent rattle. Then she added, "And now she thinks if she says she was confused, we will all help her clean it up." My father did not look surprised. That was the first thing I noticed. The second was that my Aunt Janine set her plate down very carefully, like she did not want to make noise at a funeral. The third was that my brother looked at the floor. I said, "Show me one document I signed." My mother smiled, controlled, pitying. "Melissa, this is not the room." "But it was the room for that?" I asked. 15 faces turned from her to me and back again. Someone muted the TV. My father stepped in with that calm public voice he used whenever he wanted to sound like the only adult in a room. "Our daughter has made choices. We are helping her handle the consequences privately." I looked at him and said, "Then why is the state letter mailed to my apartment, not yours?" He blinked once. My mother put her hand on his arm before he answered. "Because you used your apartment," she said. I asked, "Then what's the Gilbert address?" She said, "I will not do this with you when guests are here." That line landed exactly how she wanted it to. Like I was the one breaking etiquette, like the real issue was my timing. I left 6 minutes later, not because I was ashamed, because I understood something final. If they were willing to say that in front of 32 people, they already had a script. I drove home with the game commentary, still faint through somebody's open window as I passed their neighbors' houses, and at the first red light on McKellips Road, I started a voice memo and said every detail out loud before I forgot it. Date, time, who was there, exact words. I had learned the shape of the fight. Now let me take you back to Monday, February 12th, 2024, at 8:43 in the morning, to the Arizona Corporation Commission office in Phoenix. The waiting room smelled like paper dust and burnt coffee, and a man in a plaid shirt was arguing softly with the front desk about a filing fee. I had taken the day off work and worn a black cardigan because it made me feel older than I was. Rachel met me there with a legal pad and a pen clipped into her bun. That morning, I got copies of the incorporation papers. My name was typed neatly where the director and treasurer line belonged. The signature was supposed to be mine. It wasn't. Whoever did it knew how I wrote my M, but not how I crossed my T. The loop was too high. The pressure was wrong. My real signature pulls left at the end because I write too fast. This one stopped clean. A clerk named Oscar Bellamy slid the copies back across the counter and said, "If this is not your signature, you need to keep every piece of correspondence. Every envelope, too." I asked if he saw this kind of thing often. He said often enough that I keep my own records in a firebox. That sentence stayed with me. From there, Rachel drove us to the UPS store on North Higley Road. The woman working there, Marisol Vega, had a gold star sticker on her name tag and a tired kindness about her. She could not give us private account details, but when I showed her the public filing with the mailbox number, she told me the box had been rented in October by a man and woman together, and the woman had done most of the talking. Marisol said she remembered because the woman asked whether charity mail got more trust from donors if it looked local. I asked if she would be willing to write down what she remembered. She looked at me for a second and said, "If someone used your name, yes." So she wrote the date she remembered, the number of people at the counter, and the phrase the woman used. She signed and dated it. I put it in the binder. At 1:20 p.m., I called the bank listed on one donor receipt we had found through a screenshot. Desert Canyon Community Bank, Gilbert Branch. I asked to speak with someone about an account opened under my name. The receptionist transferred me twice. A branch operations manager named Denise Rucker came on the line. She had a low, even voice. I told her there was a charity account with my name on state records and I had never opened it. She asked me 3 questions. Did I have a copy of the filing? Yes. Did I have ID? Yes. Had money moved through the account? I did not know. She told me to come in the next morning at 9 and bring everything. At the salon, things were getting worse. My manager, Priya Nair, called me into the back room on Wednesday, February 14th at 3:15 in the afternoon, while a diffuser hummed and someone out front was laughing too loud at the reception desk. Priya had printed an email from an address that matched the charity domain. The subject line was urgent conduct concern. It said they had reason to believe I had mishandled charitable funds and that anyone employing me should be cautious about customer payments. My mother and father had not stopped at humiliating me in a living room. They had started using the fake charity's email to poison my job. Priya asked, "Is this real?" I said no, and I can prove it. She studied my face for a long second, then nodded once. Priya is one of those women who wastes nothing. Not words, not time, not sympathy. "Then prove it fast," she said. "I believe you. But businesses get nervous." I went home that night and expanded the binder into 3 binders. One for state documents, one for digital records, one for witness statements and timeline. I printed screenshots of my work clock-ins for the dates the website updates happened. Rachel helped me request login activity from the website host. The IP address that created the donor page came from a home internet account in East Mesa, my parents' neighborhood. The account recovery phone number ended in 42. My father's cell phone ended in 42. I did not confront them. I did not announce anything. Instead, I built the wall slowly, one brick at a time. On Friday, February 16th at 6:50 p.m., my pastor, Reverend Colin Marsh, called me. My parents attended Desert Vine Community Church every Sunday and volunteered with youth fundraising. Reverend Marsh asked if I could meet with him to discuss making donors whole. I asked who told him I owed donors anything. He hesitated for exactly 2 beats and said, "Your mother is worried about your stress level." That was when I understood they were using every institution that came naturally to them. Church, work, community boards, the posture of concern. They were not trying to hide me, they were trying to place me. We met the next day in his office because I wanted to hear it with my own ears. The room smelled like old carpet and peppermint tea. There were 3 framed mission trip photos on the wall and a ceramic cross on the bookshelf. My mother was already there when I walked in, so was my father. So was Teresa Nolan, my godmother, who sat by the window with her purse on her lap and would not meet my eyes. My mother spoke first. "Melissa, if you admit there was mismanagement, we can tell people you were overwhelmed and set up a repayment plan." I said, "Show me one thing I signed." My father folded his hands. This does not need to become ugly. It already is, I said. Reverend Marsh cleared his throat and said, Melissa, your parents have expressed that they are trying to protect your future. I took the first binder out of my tote bag and put it on his desk. Then the second. Then the third. The sound they made on the wood was more satisfying than I expected. I'm protecting my future, I said. Teresa finally looked up. Her lipstick had bled into the little lines around her mouth. She said nothing. I opened the binder to the incorporation papers, then to my work schedule, then to the screenshot of the website host showing the admin login from my parents' neighborhood while I was clocked in at the salon. I put my real signature from my driver's license renewal receipt beside the fake one on the filing. Reverend Marsh leaned closer. My mother did not, she said. Anybody can print things. That sentence would have broken me a year earlier. This time it gave me something useful. It gave me a perfect measure of how far she intended to go. I said, good. Then let's keep collecting. If you have ever been in a room where someone expects you to crumble and you simply do not, you know there is a tiny shift in the air. Not victory, recalculation. They start looking for a different tool. That was the meeting where I realized my godmother knew more than she was saying, and what she was keeping quiet would matter later. Before we get to that part, please take a second to like and subscribe if this story is hitting home for you. It really helps the channel, and it helps other women find these stories too. On Tuesday, February 20th at 9:02 a.m., I sat across from Denise Rucker at Desert Canyon Community Bank. Her office had fake succulents, a wall calendar from a Rotary Club, and that strong, clean smell banks always have like printer toner and lemon disinfectant. She wore a navy blazer and half-moon glasses. She had already pulled the charity account records because I had sent the filing the day before. She slid a stack of printed statements across her desk and tapped the top page with one manicured finger. The account was opened October 9th, 2023, she said. Your name is listed as treasurer. 2 in-person signers were added at opening. David Carter and Elaine Carter. I felt the floor drop under me and somehow also get clearer. Can I see the signature card? I asked. She handed me a copy. There was my fake signature again. Under it were my parents' real ones. Not implied, not suspected there. The account took in $83,640 between October 10th and January 26th. I know that number because I stared at it until it stopped feeling like a number and started feeling like a list of people fooled one by one. 9,000 from a booster club at Mesa Verde Charter, 12,000 from a holiday donor dinner, 4,600 from Kendall Reese's hardware chain, 300 here, 700 there, checks, online gifts, 2 cash deposits, then the withdrawals started, cashier's checks, ATM withdrawals, card purchases, a landscaping invoice, $4,287 at an RV dealership, $1,500 at a resort in Sedona. 3,120 at a catering company. None of it went to scholarships or youth programs or medical aid or anything close. I asked Denise the question I had been dreading. Did anyone ever show up pretending to be me? She looked down at her notes. No one pretended to be you after the opening, but the person who presented identification for the account opening was recorded as you. I said, recorded how? She turned the monitor slightly and showed me the teller notes. Arizona driver's license presented, Melissa A. Carter, photo matches. My mother still had an old color copy of my license from a previous apartment application packet. I knew it because she once texted me a photo of it by mistake in 2022 and then said, cleaning files. I asked Denise if there was any surveillance from account opening day. She said standard lobby footage was not kept that long, but drive-through and ATM images tied to later cash withdrawals still existed for part of the period because of a flagged donor inquiry in January. She could not just hand everything over to me, but she could note my fraud claim, freeze the account history, and connect me to the bank's internal investigator. That investigator, a man named Trevor Lynn, called me the next day and asked for my employment records for 5 specific dates. 3 withdrawal dates and 2 website update dates. I sent them within 30 minutes on Thursday, February 22nd at 7:21 p.m. Teresa Nolan called me. I let it ring 5 times before I answered. She said she did not have long. Her voice sounded papery, like she was whispering in a coat closet. I should have said something at Colin's office, she said. Your mother asked me in October if I knew any donors who liked child-focused giving. She told me you were starting a student relief fund and that she was helping with the paperwork because you were too busy. I leaned against my kitchen counter and closed my eyes. Did you believe her? I asked. I wanted to, she said. Then she told me the part that mattered. On Saturday, October 7th, she had been in my parents' dining room, dropping off a casserole dish, and saw a stack of donor letters on the table with my name printed at the bottom. She also saw my old high school yearbook photo propped near a laptop. My mother told her they were building a page for Melissa's initiative. Teresa said she felt strange about it because I had not mentioned anything, but my mother told her not to bother me because young women overcomplicate money. That line was pure Elaine. I asked Teresa if she would write it down. She said yes. Then she cried for about 10 seconds in a very controlled way and hung up. I did not comfort her. I was past comforting witnesses. On Sunday, February 25th, my apartment manager, Chris Halpern, knocked on my door at 11:30 in the morning. He smelled like dryer sheets and stale coffee. He held a clipboard and looked embarrassed. He said someone had called the leasing office and said I was under investigation for financial fraud and might disappear owing rent. Company policy required him to confirm my current contact information. I asked what name the caller gave. He looked down at the note. Elaine Carter. She said she was your mother. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because the escalation had become almost mechanical. They were touching every system around me just to see what might move. I updated the binder again. This is what I want to say to anyone listening who has dealt with this kind of family. The danger is not always chaos. Sometimes it is choreography. They know which words make other people lean toward them. They know how to sound tired and concerned and disappointed in a way that gets them believed. But that only works until the paperwork catches up. Now let me take you back to Friday, March 1st, 2024, at 5:58 p.m. to my parents' driveway in Mesa. The orange tree near their front walk was dropping fruit early, and the air smelled like wet dirt because somebody on the street had just run a hose. I had texted my father that I needed 10 minutes and would prefer to speak outside. He replied, briefly. He came out alone, hands in pockets, church polo shirt, the same expression he used when a waiter got his order wrong. I held my phone in my coat pocket, recording audio. Legal in Arizona as a one-party consent state, Rachel had made me repeat that fact until I remembered it. I said, "The bank has your signatures on the charity account." He did not answer immediately. He looked at the street, then back at me. Finally, he said, "Your mother and I have spent years building trust in this community. You do not understand the pressure of leadership." I said, "That is not an answer." He lowered his voice. The funds were going to be restored. I felt something inside me turn from fear into shape. "Then why was my name on it?" I asked. "Because your name was clean," he said. Those were his exact words. I asked him if he wanted to repeat them. He did not. Then he said the most useful thing of all. "Do not make this bigger than it needs to be. We can settle donors quietly if you stop acting offended." "Acting offended," I said. "You put my name on fraud." He glanced toward the front window. "Melissa, just that. My name is a warning." I went home and saved the audio file in 3 places. 2 days later, on Sunday afternoon, Trevor Lynn from the bank called. He said there were still images from 3 drive-through cash withdrawals in late December and early January. He could not email them directly to me, but he could arrange for me to review them in person because I was the named victim in the internal fraud report. Rachel went with me on Tuesday. The stills were grainy, time-stamped, and undeniable. December 28th, 11:14 a.m. My father in his silver F-150 at lane 2. January 3rd, 1:36 p.m. My mother in a tan cardigan with oversized sunglasses. January 9th, 12:08 p.m. My father again. In all 3 photos, I was at work. Priya signed a letter confirming I was physically at the salon on East Baseline Road those mornings and early afternoons. We matched the timestamps minute by minute. That was when the whole thing stopped feeling like a nightmare and started feeling like a package. A package I could hand to the right person. I still needed one more thing. Something that tied community knowledge to the lie. Something that showed they were not just stealing but recruiting belief. That came from the person who had stayed silent the longest. My brother Luke, he texted me on Wednesday, March 6th at 11:47 p.m. "Can I come by? Not home?" He arrived 12 minutes later in gym shorts and slides, smelling like gas station cologne and cold night air. He sat on the edge of my couch and stared at his hands for a full minute before speaking. "I saw Mom use your old apartment folder in October," he said. The one with your license copy and your social. I asked why she had it out. She said she was checking your employment history because you were applying for grants. I let him keep talking. He told me he had also overheard our father on speakerphone with Kendall Reese from the hardware store saying, Melissa is the face of this one. People respond better to younger women. Luke said he knew it sounded wrong but convinced himself there was some normal explanation because our parents always had one. Then he gave me something concrete. In late January, after donor complaints had started, our mother had asked him to drive a banker box from the hall closet to the trunk of her car. The box was labeled Bright Steps. He did not know what was in it, but he remembered taking it out because he cut his finger on a broken file tab and bled on one corner. There was still a rusty brown smudge there. Do they still have it? I asked. He nodded. Hall closet, top shelf, left side. I asked why he was telling me now. He looked sick. Because at the Super Bowl party, Dad told me if anyone asked, I was supposed to say you ran the donor dinner, and I knew you didn't. I knew. I believed him because shame has a sound, and his did. Will you say that out loud if I need you to? I asked. He swallowed and said yes. I did not hug him. I gave him a glass of water and sent him home at 12:41 a.m. Boundaries are easier once a family has taught you the price of softness. If you've ever had a sibling stand in the doorway between loyalty and choose truth too late, you know it is not satisfying. It is useful. That is different. And what happened next is where it all finally moved from my binders into a room they could not control. On Monday, March 11th, Reverend Marsh emailed me and several donors inviting us to a clarifying meeting at Desert Vine Community Church. On Thursday, March 14th at 7 p.m., the email said the purpose was to address miscommunication regarding Bright Steps Youth Fund and its stewardship. My parents had pushed for a church meeting because they still believed they could outspeak the paperwork if they stood in a familiar room. Rachel read the email and said, Good, let them gather the witnesses. I spent the next 3 days preparing like I was packing for weather copies for everyone. One complete binder for me, one slim packet for Reverend Marsh, one for Kendall Reese, one for the donor committee chair from Mesa Verde Charter, a timeline on top, then signatures, then account statement summary, then witness notes, then my work records, then still images, then transcripts of my father's recorded driveway admission and the exact wording from the Super Bowl party voice memo. On Wednesday afternoon, Denise Rucker called me from her office line. She said, Melissa, I heard there is a community meeting tomorrow. I need to be careful how I phrase this, but our internal investigation is complete enough that I'm authorized to confirm certain facts directly to concerned donors, if asked in a joint setting. I sat down so fast my chair scraped the tile. Would you come? I asked. She paused. If the bank is asked whether you opened or used the account in question, yes. I thanked her twice. Then I called Rachel, who screamed once and then got very calm. That night I did not sleep much. My apartment smelled like printer ink and the lavender laundry detergent I use when I need my life to feel softer than it is. I laid out my clothes on the chair by the window. Black slacks, cream sweater, gold hoops, low heels I could stand in for 2 hours. My binder sat on the table, zipped inside a navy case like something alive. I had been keeping that folder for 31 days. Now let me take you back to Tempe, Arizona. Thursday, March 14th, 2024, 6:56 p.m., Desert Vine Community Church Fellowship Hall, metal chairs, beige walls, industrial coffee urns by the side table, lemon bars under plastic wrap. The air conditioner was too cold and the whole room smelled like powdered creamer and floor wax. 39 people were there when I walked in. I know because I counted once while pretending not to. Reverend Marsh stood near the front with two members of the church finance team. Kendall Reese sat in the second row in his navy windbreaker. The Mesa Verde Charter Donor Committee Chair, Lorraine Fuller, had brought a legal pad. Teresa Nolan was by the back wall with both hands around a paper cup. Luke came in 2 minutes after I did and sat near the exit. My parents were already at the front table. My mother wore a soft blue blouse and the silver cross necklace she used when she wanted to look gentle. My father had a leather folder in front of him and a pen placed exactly parallel to it. When I sat down across from them, he gave me a look that said I was embarrassing us. That look had worked on me for years. It did not work that night. Reverend Marsh opened with prayer. Of course he did. Then he said there had been confusion around Bright Steps, and this meeting was meant to restore clarity and trust. My mother spoke first. Her voice was controlled, low, and heartbreakingly reasonable if you did not know her. Melissa has been under tremendous strain, she said. As parents, we stepped in to support a project that grew faster than she could manage. We never intended for her private difficulties to become public. Our hope tonight is simply to calm rumors and discuss restitution. I let her finish. Then Reverend Marsh turned to me. Melissa, would you like to respond? I said yes. But first, I would like the bank to answer one question. The room shifted. Not loudly. Chairs moved, cups set down. I turned toward the back because Denise Rucker had just walked in. She was wearing a charcoal blazer and carrying a slim black folder. I had never met her in a social setting. She had no stake in my family's dynamics. She looked exactly like what she was, a bank professional there to say what the record said and nothing else. Reverend Marsh looked confused. Ms. Rucker? She nodded once. I was asked whether I could verify account facts if donor concerns were discussed in a group setting. I can, my mother said. I do not think that is necessary. Denise did not look at her. She looked at Reverend Marsh. Would you like the bank's answer or not? He swallowed and said yes. Denise opened her folder. The pages made that crisp sound good paper makes in a quiet room. She said Desert Canyon Community Bank reviewed the account for Bright Steps Youth Fund opened on October 9, 2023. Melissa Ann Carter is listed on the opening paperwork, but based on our internal review, she did not appear in person to open the account, did not conduct the 3 documented cash withdrawals reviewed, and was not the user of record on associated account activity examined by the bank. Silence. Real silence this time. Full room silence, the kind that has weight. Then Denise added, reading directly from her page, the in-person signers added at account opening were David Carter and Elaine Carter. My father started to say Mel and stopped on the first syllable. Lorraine Fuller from Mesa Verde Charter said, I'm sorry, what? Denise repeated the signer names, calmly, clearly, like she was reading a routing number. Kendall Reese turned in his chair and looked straight at my father. Teresa put her cup down and it tipped over on the table, but nobody cared. Luke closed his eyes. My mother tried one last move. There must be some misunderstanding in the way the system logs supportive family access. Denise turned a page. There is no misunderstanding on the signer card. Then she handed Reverend Marsh a copy. I did not speak. I let the paper travel. Reverend Marsh looked at the signatures, then at me, then at my parents. His face changed in small stages. Confusion, resistance, recognition. I opened my binder and slid packets down the row to Lorraine Fuller, Kendall Reese, and Reverend Marsh. Rachel, who had come in quietly and taken a seat along the wall, helped me pass the rest. These are the records I have collected over the last month, I said. My work time records for the dates, the website was updated, and the withdrawals were made. The website host login location, the state incorporation signature comparison, notes from the UPS store employee, a written statement from Teresa Nolan, and a transcript of a conversation with my father on March 1st. My mother said you recorded your father? I looked at Reverend Marsh and said, I documented my life. Kendall was already flipping pages. On page 4 was the summary of donations. On page 6, the signer card. On page 8, the withdrawal stills with timestamps. On page 11, the transcript. He read one line out loud because some people cannot help themselves when truth gets sharp. Because your name was clean. My father's shoulders changed. Just slightly. They lost that public squareness. Teresa spoke next, and this mattered more than I expected. She said, into the room. Elaine told me in October that Melissa was the face of the charity and that I should send donors her way. Melissa never asked me for anything. Elaine did. My mother looked at her like she had broken a sacred rule. Then Luke stood up. He was pale but not performatively, just sick with what he was doing. I saw Mom with Melissa's old license copy and documents, he said. And Dad told me to say Melissa ran the donor dinner if anyone asked. She didn't. The room made that small collective sound people make when they realize they have been sitting inside a lie together. Not a gasp. More like the air changing shape. Reverend Marsh asked my father if he wanted to respond. My father looked at the packet in front of him and said, this was supposed to be temporary. That was it. No apology, no denial worth hearing. Just a partial sentence that admitted the heart of it. My mother said nothing for nearly 10 seconds. Then she reached for the packet, squared the pages, and said, this should not have been done here. Lorraine Fuller answered before I could, where exactly did you want it done, Elaine? That line bought me more peace than any speech could have. The next 20 minutes were not dramatic in the movie sense. They were administrative, which was better. Donors asked specific questions: how much money came from whom, what remained in the account, whether the church had promoted the charity from the stage, whether Bright Steps had ever been a registered partner with Mesa Verde Charter. Denise answered only what the bank could verify. I answered only what my documents covered. Rachel took notes. Reverend Marsh looked like a man hearing his own judgment read in installments. At 7:49 p.m., Denise confirmed the amount still left in the account after the freeze, $4,309.18, which meant over $79,000 had already been spent or moved. Kendall asked my parents directly, "Did you take my store's $4,600? My father did not answer. My mother said the funds were being managed during a complicated period. Kendall laughed once hard. That is not what I asked. By 8 o'clock, the church finance team had decided all church promotion of Bright Steps was suspended pending review. Lorraine said Mesa Verde Charter would notify its booster members that the charity had falsely represented student support and that all future questions should go through the school's council and bank contacts. Reverend Marsh asked everyone to remain calm. Nobody listened because calm was no longer his to manage. I had imagined that moment so many times. I thought I would feel triumphant. Instead, I felt precise, like a person finally standing in her own outline. If you have ever waited for the truth to arrive from someone else's mouth, you know how strange it is when it finally does. You are not healed, you are confirmed. That is not the same thing, and there was still one more part left, because exposure is not the price. The price is what comes after. Now, let me take you back to Monday, April 22nd, 2024, at 10:11 a.m., when the consequences started becoming official enough that even my mother could not talk around them. The first was the bank. Desert Canyon closed the account, flagged both of my parents from opening new business or charity accounts there, and sent its findings to the State Charity Oversight Unit and the donors who had asked for written confirmation. I received a letter on bank letterhead stating that I had been identified as a fraud victim in connection with the account and that the bank's internal review did not support that I opened or used it. I keep that letter in the front pocket of the binder now. It weighs almost nothing. It cost me 38 days of my life. The second was the church. On Sunday, April 7th, Desert Vine Community Church removed both of my parents from all volunteer and finance-related roles. Reverend Marsh called me himself at 4:32 p.m. He sounded older than he had a month earlier. He said the board had voted unanimously. My father was no longer permitted to handle donation drives, and my mother was removed from the Women's Outreach Fundraising Committee. The following Wednesday, they sent an email to the congregation saying prior support for Bright Steps had been based on false representations by organizers. That phrase made several people suddenly remember the Super Bowl party. The third was money, real money. Donors wanted it back. Because the signer card and withdrawal records named my parents, and because multiple donors had packets now, they could not keep pretending this was just a family misunderstanding. Kendall Reese went after the return of his $4,600. Mesa Verde Charter's booster group demanded the return of $9,000. Several church donors asked for their checks to be traced and repaid by June. My parents had signed a repayment agreement through their own attorney for $79,330.82, spread across structured payments and a forced sale of the fifth wheel RV my father bought in December. That RV, the one partly paid for out of charity money, sold for $26,800 on May 19th. Luke texted me the online listing as proof. I never responded. The fourth consequence was one my mother hated most because it was social and permanent. The East Valley Community Outreach Board, the one my father still liked to name drop, formally barred both of them from advisory and donor-facing roles after seeing the bank summary and donor statements. It was not criminal court, it was not handcuffs, it was something they cared about more. Rooms closed to them. As for me, I got my name cleared in writing with the state records after the fraud notation was added, and the organization was moved toward dissolution. I also kept my job. Priya gave me a 50-cent raise in May and said for surviving paperwork with style. It was the nicest thing anyone said to me all spring. My mother tried calling me 7 times the week the church board email went out. I know because I saved the missed call screenshots with timestamps. My father left 2 voicemails. In the first, he said, "This has gone too far." In the second, he said, "Your mother is not sleeping." Neither message included the words I am sorry. On Friday, May 3rd at 6:18 p.m., my parents came to my apartment uninvited. I could smell my neighbor's laundry vent and somebody's overcooked onions from down the hall. I did not open the door. My mother spoke through it anyway. Melissa, families do not do this to each other, she said. I stood on my side of the door, barefoot on the cheap carpet, and answered, You attached my name to fraud, she said. We gave you everything. I said you used everything. Then I walked back to my kitchen and let them stand there until they left. I changed my locks the next week, not because they had a key, because I needed the sound of a new lock turning. By July, some people had chosen their version of the story. A few relatives still called it a misunderstanding that got out of hand. Those relatives are welcome to live at a distance from me forever. Others saw it for what it was. Aunt Janine sent me a handwritten note saying she should have spoken up in that living room. Teresa brought over lemon muffins in June and apologized twice. I accepted the muffins. I did not offer absolution. Luke moved out in August and got a roommate in Chandler. We speak sometimes carefully. He is trying, which is not the same as having tried when it mattered, but it is something I keep him at arm's length because arm's length is where I can breathe. People ask me if I miss my parents. I miss the idea of having parents. I miss the version of adulthood where your own name still feels like a safe place to stand. What I do not miss is confusion. I do not miss standing in rooms arranged by them and wondering whether I am hearing the truth or just the most convenient sentence. There is one image I still come back to. Not the Super Bowl party, not even the church hall. It is the signer card at the bank, my fake signature above their real ones. That piece of paper taught me something simple and ugly. They did not just use my name, they stood underneath it. So this is where it ended, at least on paper. My name was cleared. Their roles were stripped, their charity was shut down. They owed back $79,330.82. My father's RV was sold, their church positions were gone. The rooms they cared about most no longer opened when they walked toward them, and me. I still keep the binder. Not because I'm afraid I will forget, because I know exactly what happened and there is peace in never having to wonder again. I do not forgive them just because the numbers finally lined up and the right woman read the right sentence in the right room. Winning quietly is still winning. But it does not rebuild the part of you that learned your parents could look at your clean name and think of it as inventory. I am doing better now, not healed in a neat, inspiring way. Just better. I sleep, I work, I answer my own phone, I keep my records. If a form asks for emergency contact, I no longer freeze. Sometimes justice is not dramatic. Sometimes it is a bank manager in a charcoal blazer saying your parents' names out loud in front of 39 people. Sometimes it is a church email. Sometimes it is a sold RV in a locked fellowship hall. Sometimes it is a woman your mother counted on being quiet who simply isn't. That is enough for me.